think it's starting to break through when you have Henry Cuellar and other Democrats at the border yelling.
Actually, Senator Booker this morning on CNBC said there's a crisis on the border today.
Well,
Quote,
I guarantee you there is. A guy I've known for 20 years is now head of communications for DHS. He was previously in Iraq for a number of years, and then he was at Gitmo, and he now retired admiral from the United States Navy. And he said it is a humanitarian crisis, not just a crisis of how to deal with it.
that's right. And I think people, with Republicans, it's lost often because we talk so much about our citizens, but that's a disaster for these kids. I mean, they're on pace to
They're encouraging people.
record.
They're encouraging people to come break the
That's
law.
right. That's exactly right. And risk their lives. And one of the
hawk the farm.
Hawk the farm and get assaulted. And okay, this order just kind of came in as it came in. So if there's anybody's name,
So listen
we've got
really quickly.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be Brady, and then you and Miss Lesko needs to go right after
So
Mr.
where's
Roy.
Brady? You just put him in there.
Well, he's gonna be
Can I have
when
a
Brady
pen?
finishes. So you can have this one. But after Mr.
Where's-
Roy, Miss Lesko needs to go because she has to
Where's
speak on HR.
Brady from Texas?
I got the privilege of serving with him on rules last session.
He's very knowledgeable about the workings of the majority.
And then I'm gonna
What he's saying.
Dangerous.
8th district. That's next,
So
or
I
Chip?
moved it up. No, go Chip, and then
Okay.
she's got to go speak on HR.
Okay.
Judiciary's not flexible on the time. So.
Okay. If somebody if somebody walks up here and they're not on this list, who's going to be responsible for giving me that sheet of paper since you're working the press? Do you want to give it to Haley? Okay.
Look at your sunglasses on.
I've got it. You just slip me a piece of paper and I'll read who's next. This is the list that just came in as it came in. I still have the pen. This is a list.
That's it. That's
yeah,
official.
Yeah, that's official. Yeah,
That's
don't be
what's
touching.
going in
Don't
the
touch it.
archives?
That's going in.
I don't know.
Okay, we ready? Yeah, I need a pen just in case I.
Well, let us see the list.
Y'all look at the list real quick. Just see where you're coming up. Is that? Are you on there? I know you. Yeah, right there. Okay, because we got to. We're trying to spread the wealth. We don't want to dominate. The Texans are very.
Jody, who am I
sensitive about
after?
it.
I
You're going
just
to
wanna
be.
know
You're
who
going to
I
be
am.
after Chip. You're number 2.
Chip.
Yeah,
Okay,
you're
thanks, thank you.
I'll just know by name.
Bad. Where are you?
Okay.
You're number 3. You're just remember you're after Randy Weber, the man, the myth, the legend.
You want me to introduce her?
No, I'm gonna just keep coming up and take next one. So you don't have to worry about it. Actually,
How you doing, Coach?
yeah, listen, it makes it easier if y'all did that. But
It's
it's
up
just,
to you.
yeah, I'll just
If I
do
don't do
it.
it, you come do
Okay,
it. How
yeah,
about
we'll do that.
I must be missing my.
Okay.
I don't. Maybe I should have brought my bike.
Okay, who
I don't see my
gets
name
to
on there.
say it's a beautiful day at the people's house in
neighbor's
Rachel
bed.
Cabin, but not so beautiful razor wire fence around it. I'm gonna leave that. I'm just gonna give. I'm gonna give.
Giving that to
you guys. Yeah, you're the first up.
Here we are at Fort Phillips, day 60 of the occupation.
Okay, let's.
Okay. Oh, I gotta go on this.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for coming out and covering this important press conference and listening to our profound concerns about what's going on at the border. We are representatives. We are members of Congress who represent border states, and our communities are at ground zero, and our constituents on the front lines bearing the brunt of the lawlessness and self-inflicted crisis at the border created by the Biden administration. The first step in solving a crisis is to first admit you have one. But let's be clear, even if you don't admit it, it doesn't mean that there isn't a crisis, and the facts on the ground, folks, do not lie. This year, we've seen double the number of apprehensions at the border. In fact, CBP just released this afternoon that in February, there were over 100,000 apprehensions, triple the number of migrant children trafficked here by drug cartels. That's over 320 kids a day being apprehended and detained, and we're on pace to have over 120,000 migrant children trafficked here to the United States. That's 30% higher than any record year prior. Even President Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, said that 1,000 crossings a day is a crisis. Folks, we are upwards of 4,000 a day. you would have to have the most acute case of suspended reality to deny that we have a border crisis. This crisis is a direct result, let's be very clear, a direct result of President Biden's unilateral actions, to name a few: reinstating catch and release, repealing funding for the border wall, re-empowering sanctuary cities, and rescinding the stay in Mexico policy. Why is he doing it? Well, I think it's because President Biden is obsessed with repealing everything with Trump's name on it. I think he's equally obsessed with acquiescing to every demand of the radical left. Policies have consequences. You show me the policy, and I'll show you the outcome, and the outcome of the Biden administration policies are devastating to our communities, and they will destroy our country. I've gathered my colleagues here today, and I want to hear from them, and I know you do too. So first up is my friend Chip Roy from the great state of Texas, representing Texas 21st District. Chip.
Well, thanks, Jody. Thanks for pulling us together, and thanks for my colleagues here from border states. We're feeling the brunt of this directly, and to be clear, this crisis is affecting our entire country, and frankly, it's affecting our friends to the south throughout this hemisphere, and it's a tragedy that could be completely avoided. But why is this happening? We see it right here. This is the Biden border crisis. It is owned completely and entirely by President Biden and his administration, with their complete refusal to enforce the laws of the United States, purposefully ignoring their duty under the Constitution to enforce the laws of the United States, and that matters for human beings, American citizens, who are endangered in our state of Texas, in our country. Talk to the mayor of towns like Uvalde, of towns like Lakey and Camp Wood and Real County that I represent. Talk to the border communities. You've seen the video from the Del Rio mayor. Go down and talk to people in the border in South Texas and along all of the states along the border and what's happening. High-speed chases, break-ins, crime that's increasing. Cartels have operational control of our border. And the Biden administration knows it, and they don't care. Because for political purposes, they're perfectly fine having open borders that endanger the lives of American citizens, but also the immigrants who seek to come here. Children being abused on the journey while they claim in the false name of compassion that open borders is somehow pro-immigrant. I'm here to tell you that secure borders is pro-immigrant, pro-America, and pro our values, and the Biden administration doesn't care. Jody talked about 100,000 apprehensions in February. What is it going to take for this town and for the media and for people around this country to wake up and see what's happening at the border and the crisis that it means for our country and the people seeking to come here? 6,000 people in one day apprehended. 6,000 people in a day. That doesn't count the 800 to 1,000 gotaways estimated that day. And do you know what happens when Border Patrol is distracted, having to deal with unaccompanied children packed into facilities, and now they're filled? And now Border Patrol is now releasing people immediately into our country, oftentimes sick with the COVID virus? That's happening. There were 11,000 people released out of Border Patrol immediately into our communities in January and February. That's from inside sources at DHS. Think about that number. That's endangering our country. And I'll end with this. My colleague Yvette Harrell from New Mexico is going to talk about the bill she has to ensure that we continue to enforce Title 42 to protect the health and well-being of American citizens from the spread of the COVID virus, and why that needs to continue to be enforced by this administration. She's got a bill. We've got a rule. We're going to try to discharge that bill on the floor of the House and demand that we vote on it and force our Democratic colleagues to stand up and do their duty to defend the United States of America and protect our citizens, and again, to protect the immigrants who seek to come here. I'm going to turn it over now to my friend, Debbie Lesko from Arizona. Oh, yes, Debbie Lesko from Arizona.
All right. Thank you, Chip. Debbie Lesko from the great border state of Arizona, and I'm here to tell you there is a crisis on the border. And the reason I know that is because the Yuma, Arizona mayor and sheriff and the Cochise County sheriff in Arizona have said there's a crisis on the border, and they're on the ground and they see it each and every day. They say illegal immigrants are being released into Arizona communities. Some of them are not even being tested for COVID-19. And I can guarantee you the reason that thousands upon thousands of illegal immigrants are traveling thousands of miles to get into the United States is because of Biden's lax immigration policies. He is incentivizing these young children, minors, to travel thousands of miles at the mercy of dangerous cartels. I've talked to the Yuma, Arizona sheriff. He has shown me the date farms where women are being raped, where he's being called because illegal immigrant women and girls are being raped at the hands of the cartel. This is child abuse. And Biden and his policies are to blame. On March 8th, I wrote a letter to the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security demanding answers. What are you going to do about this catastrophe? It is a humanitarian crisis. It is a health crisis. And it is a national security crisis. And it needs to end. Thank you. And next up is Pete Sessions from the great state of Texas.
Great job, Debbie.
Thank you very much for being here. Each new president of the United States takes an oath of office to well and faithfully execute the laws of this great nation. On the same day that Joseph Biden did that, he went back to the White House and signed documents that in essence took away every obligation that he had made while taking that oath of office here at the Capitol. To well and faithfully execute the office and the laws of this country mean that you need to work through a process, but to unilaterally disobey the law, to encourage thousands of others to take the risk of their lives and against the security of this nation is just simply unfathomable to many of us. We live in border states. We live in states where people come through. We've attempted in the past to work on immigration laws that would strengthen the ability for us to take people who are in this country, but not to encourage illegal immigration. Illegal immigration by itself creates a circumstance that is bad, not only for this country, but for the rule of law, and makes us look bad as a nation. By myself, I will tell you that I see the impact that takes place in our cities with crime, in our schools that have to pay for these types of circumstances, and worst of all, a lawless society because they came here illegally, they think by invitation of the President of the United States. We are asking for President Biden to please recognize the disaster, the crisis that he has created, and this administration has an obligation not just to follow the law, but to well and faithfully execute the office that he undertook. And we call on the President today to do just that.
Good job, Pete. Next speaker, Randy Weber from the great state of Texas.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. 5,000 people, Texans, men, women, children. When I was in the Texas legislature for 4 years, we put money on the border to try to secure our border because Obama wouldn't do his job. He invited illegals. 5,000 Texans were either killed, maimed, the women were raped, assaulted. You had crimes where they went in with violent crimes, criminals did, Mexican drug lords. 5,000 of our Texans in the year 2009, 10, 11, and 12 were either maimed, killed, or hurt. I watched the video with my heart breaking as the DPS got after a drug lord who was running in a vehicle at 90 and 100 miles an hour crashed right through a red light into the side of a Suburban had a family of 5 in it. Those 5 Texans, none of them made it out. All killed by illegal immigrants, illegal aliens intent on coming over here and taking advantage of our system. Women shouldn't be raped. There should be no violent crimes by someone who's not supposed to be in this country. Texas put $200 million a session for 4 years on the border, high-speed gunboats, over airplanes flying, helicopters, trying to secure our border when we begged Obama. Under President Trump, he came in to secure the border. That was one of his main platforms he ran on. Make Americans safe, make Americans secure. Be a country that had its own legitimate border. And Biden gets there, and what does he do? He reverses everything. How many more killed Americans, Texans, President Joe Biden, does it have to take to recognize we've got to secure our border? We've got to secure our border. This is about keeping Americans safe and protecting our own. I'm going to yield back to my good friend Yvette Harrell from New Mexico.
Land of enchantment.
Land of enchantment. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. The truth is, I've been warning my district about this crisis since the day I got sworn in. And unfortunately, I've been proven right. Because this Biden crisis on the border isn't just Biden's. It's yours. It's America's. And the bill my colleague was talking about is the PAUSE Act. It's Title 42. We're asking this president to leave Title 42 in play. This was the health order under President Trump that allowed Border Patrol agents to expel those coming here illegally on the border within a couple of hours to either Mexico or Canada. This is a public safety order. And I can't think of one person in this country that hasn't been affected by COVID-19. I'm sure some of you in the press have a friend, a family member who's been affected, maybe even died. So while we've sat for the last year with our masks on and our doors closed and our kids not being educated, trying to flatten the curve and do all these things that our government has mandated us to do, it is reckless, it is selfish, and it is harmful for us to now turn the blind eye and allow illegals into this nation that we know have been exposed to or have COVID-19. I, for one, have had a sister in the hospital that went through surgery. I couldn't be there with her. Her children couldn't be there with her. Why? Because of COVID. I've had countless people call my office because their loved ones are alone in senior living establishments. They cannot see their loved ones on their dying beds because of COVID-19. And now, to open the border and think this is somehow a good idea is a terrible idea. And we should all be very ashamed of what this administration is doing, not only to our country, but to those that are coming here illegally. I believe we are better than this and deserve way better than this. This Biden crisis has got to be fixed. And I'm standing with my colleagues to tell them just that. Shame on this administration for putting the lives of the American people at risk, greater risk. Our first responders, our seniors, our small communities. And it's not just government that's affected. It's not just the sheriffs talking about it. It's all the ranchers and farmers in my district, 180 miles of border. There are holes in the border where now illegals are coming through. So try leaving your barn at night and carrying a gun because of the illegals that are hanging out in your yard. Or talk to the family who had their young 6-year-old daughter kidnapped 3 weeks ago by illegals and tell me this is the good thing to do. I stand with my colleagues. We've got to close this border. We've got to protect Americans first. Thank you for doing this.
Now the Dean of the Texas delegation and our good friend Kevin Brady.
Congressman Arrington, thank you for bringing together leaders in Washington who are truly concerned about this border crisis. So let's begin by being real honest with each other. You know, the threats against the U.S. Capitol are largely imaginary. The crisis on the border, it is real. The Biden border crisis is real, and it is only going to get worse. Think about this. On day one of his presidency, he halted the border wall construction and revoked President Trump's administration's national emergency declaration. He removed the common sense remain in Mexico policy, and he re-implemented catch and release. That means migrants who have broken our nation's laws are being released into our communities without receiving a COVID test during a pandemic. And all of this has been a big green light to undocumented children, to coyotes, to others who wish us ill to enter the United States. Already this year, as you know, fivefold increase in unaccompanied kids coming to the U.S. and a tripling of the migrants apprehended once a year. And yet, President Biden seems to be in denial, doesn't seem to acknowledge this humanitarian crisis on the border that is overwhelming our churches and our nonprofits, not just the government at the border. And make no mistake, this is his crisis. He created it and he owns it. And bottom line is, if you're not from a border state, you don't get it. You just don't get it. And I will tell you, this green light, this open border that the president has created, it is not just migrant families coming across the border. If you think that, you're just naive. The truth is, Houston area where I live has become the largest sex trafficking region in the country. Today, as we stand here in Texas, 300,000 young men and women are in the slave trade industry. And our proximity to the border is a cause of that. And I know it's easy for President Biden and the radical left to just ignore all this because it's not happening in their backyard. But the truth is, this has real consequences to the immigrants themselves, the migrants themselves, to the communities along the border, to constituents in my district. And so President Biden, I'm calling you, stop spending your time killing Texas energy jobs. Stop spending your time kowtowing to the radical left. Take ownership of this crisis that you've created. Step up and help us fix this. There are a lot of lives on the line.
Well said, Chairman. Well said. Representing the 3rd District of Texas, Van Taylor.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Van Taylor from the 3rd District of Texas. As a young Marine second lieutenant, I led U.S. Marines on the U.S.-Mexican border. That was a time under President Clinton when border security was a bipartisan issue. Unfortunately, we have a president who has decided to open our borders and allow our schools to be closed. And that's bad for children. It's bad for children here in America that want to go to school. And it's bad for children from other countries who are literally risking their lives to come here. They're being exploited by cartels. They're being sex trafficked. This is an unacceptable humanitarian crisis. It is totally predictable. It is time to return to having a secure border. It's possible. We know the policies that could secure the border, and we know them because when they were repealed just 50 days ago. In 50 days ago, we had a secure border. This president owns this crisis.
Thank you, Van. From the 1st District of Texas, Louis Gohmert.
Thank you, Jody. And we thank you for being here. This is a very, very critical issue. Anybody that has any care about them, any sympathy for what is going on at our border and south of our border, the very best thing we could do is secure the border. Having been a felony judge, I've seen and experienced the grief of more sexual abuse, more trafficking victims than I care to think about. And this administration is complicit in helping that go on. Now, I'm sure with all that's on President Biden's mind, whatever that is, he's not thinking intentionally about hurting people. But he ought to think about really helping people and the greatest damage being done. And that is this. The reason Mexico and Central America are not some of the greatest economic examples of prosperity is because of corruption. And that corruption is funded by American dollars for the sex trafficking, for the drug trafficking, and also, to some degree, there's money paid from people that want to cross our border. But I've been there all hours of the night when people were asked by the Border Patrol, how much did it cost you? That's not on their list of questions. And it'd be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. Where'd you get that money? And I haven't heard anybody that yet could explain they paid the full amount. Over and over, it's, well, we paid this much, and somebody from the U.S. sent that much, and they're going to let me pay off the rest and working for them. This is the drug cartels, and we're funding them. And they're the ones doing the sex trafficking, the corruption in Mexico. When a policeman's head's put on a pike, it was funded by American dollars that didn't secure the border. So President Biden or whoever is telling him what he should do, you need to help our neighbors by stopping the corruption. Stop your corruption. Let's secure the border.
Representing Texas 25th District, Roger Williams.
Thank you, Jody. You know, I think Kevin said it a minute ago, but nobody has a clue what it's like at that border unless you've been down there. That's right. Nobody. And Joe Biden worries about the border of Delaware. It is nothing like the border of Texas. Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine called me yesterday. He owns a lot of land in South Texas, big ranchers for 100 years in the family. Create a lot of jobs. They have now been overrun by illegals coming to their house, walking in the house with a family's there with a two-week-old baby, stealing their trucks, knocking the fences down, letting the cattle go out. That's what's happening down there. And this crisis is a crisis, and they don't want to admit it. President Biden is encouraging, as we've said, he's encouraging people to break the law. He's supposed to be the person to encourage people to abide by the law. He's telling people where to enter. Democrats have always wanted open borders. Why? Do things legally. And we shouldn't, as Texans, and people from New Mexico, great friends from New Mexico, have to pay the fee on what's happening because of his lack of concern. In my district, they make the border wall. He's halted construction of that wall. A lot of jobs are being affected. Land is being taken. This is a slap in the eye to every person that loves this country. It's a total slap in the eye, slap in the face. He cares more about those illegally than those legally. Let me say it again. President Biden is more concerned with illegal behavior and wanting it than legal behavior. And when you talk about COVID, we're all bragging about how a certain percent of America is now vaccinated. Well, we're letting all these people in. That's going to lower the percent. So now we still got a problem. So we have a situation here like we've never seen before. President Biden, we all are asking him to take a look at this and lead and not follow whoever he's taking advice from. So I would say in Texas, my colleagues know this, we simply have a statement. And I would say this to President Biden. President Biden, don't mess with Texas. Thank you very much.
That deserves a round of
Absolutely. Don't mess with Texas. That's right.
Good job, Roger. Representing Texas 27th District, Michael Cloud.
It is undeniable that this is a humanitarian and national security crisis. And what's so tragic about this is that it was predictable. And if it was predictable, it was avoidable. And unfortunately, we have not done what needs to be done to avoid it. In fact, the Biden administration has done the opposite. This is either gross negligence, incompetence, or it's by design. And what's so troubling about this is we get calls every day, as just been mentioned, from ranchers in our communities who are afraid to let their family walk their own property because of what they'll come across from migrant activity being driven by the cartels coming through their land. We've seen the videos of dads left in stash houses, stripped and beaten. That's video sent to their families to get more money. And this is after the cartels have already charged a propina, a tip, a fee to transfer these migrants across their territory to the border. This is tragic. It is tragic that this administration has decided, instead of partnering with the American people to protect communities, to instead partner with cartels, to become the last mile, so to speak, to turn our tax dollars that are supporting what's supposed to be securing our border, to instead turn them into the last mile of delivery for the cartel activity. And to think we had 100,000 migrants apprehended in the last month, paying on average $5,000 to $10,000 to make it here. We are enriching cartel activity that does devastating consequences. I've been to the facility near my district where hundreds of young women have been there, and when I visited, they said half of them had been abused. We cannot let this go on. Lawlessness is not compassion. This is immoral. It needs to stop. We need to secure our border and stop letting cartels wreak havoc in our communities and in the world at large.
Well, the senior doctor in the United States House, representing Texas 26th District, Dr. Michael Burgess.
Thank you, Jody. Leader Brady said it so well. The president needs to step up. The first step would be to go to the border to see it with your own eyes. Jody and I, May of 2019, we're down at that intake station in McAllen, down at the Ursula station. At a time it was overwhelmed. It's worse now. And the toll that takes on the men and women of Customs and Border Protection that we task to be our front line of defense, the toll it takes on those men and women is immeasurable. They all have families. They go home to their families. What they see during the day carries over with them when they take their work home with them. Also, it affects the men and women down at the Department of Health and Human Services. When those children, those unaccompanied minors, come into this country, they are no longer taken care of by DHS, Department of Defense. They are now the responsibility of the Department of Health and Human Services. So Office of Refugee Resettlement, the president needs to travel to those facilities. Thank those men and women who are doing the work on the front lines to ensure that when those children are ultimately transferred to a family here in the United States, they're done safely and that the child has some recourse if they end up someplace that really is hostile. The first step is going to the border. The president needs to take it. Thanks, Jody.
Well, as I said, these are deep concerns expressed by representatives of border states. You've heard from Texas and Arizona, New Mexico, and from the Sunshine State, our friend Tom McClintock, representing California's 4th District.
You know, so many Californians are moving to Texas, I feel right at home at this moment. The numbers speak for themselves. As a practical matter, we have no southern border at the moment because the President of the United States has directed our law enforcement agencies not to faithfully execute the laws. I think that raises a lot of questions I'd like to pose to Joe Biden if he'd ever answer any questions, but it'll do to submit them to any Democrat supporting these policies. How are American workers helped by flooding the labor market with another wave of illegal immigration? How are our children, who've been robbed of an entire year of their educations, helped by filling their classrooms with non-English speaking students? How are our streets made safer by allowing aliens who drive drunk to remain on our roads rather than being deported? How are our communities made safer by making it harder to deport criminal illegal aliens and gang members? How are our hospitals made more accessible by overwhelming emergency rooms with illegal immigrants demanding care? Why would the Democrats pursue policies that strike most acutely and painfully at working Americans? When we stopped the flow of illegal, low-wage labor, American workers saw their biggest wage gains in 40 years, and the income gap began to narrow. And now those same workers who are the most harmed by the Democrats' policies.
Great job. Well, there's a new sheriff in this town and in the Texas delegation, and it's Troy Nels representing Texas 22nd District.
Thank you, Jody, and to my friends behind me, and those of you that are here. I bring a different perspective to this debate. Serving in law enforcement for the past 30 years, and the last 8 years as a county sheriff in one of the largest counties in Texas, is Southwest Houston. And the stories that I could share with you today, but we don't have the time, the horrific stories, the number of victims in Fort Bend County that have been victimized by illegals, would make a billy goat puke. The number of victims in our county where you've been murdered or your family member has been sexually assaulted by an individual or your home was broken into and your family heirlooms are gone forever. Only to find out that when I talk to the victim of that crime, I would say to that person, I'm sorry what happened to you, but we caught the fella. And I'm sad to tell you that the individual has been deported 4 or 5, 6 times. Ask yourself the question, how does anybody ever get deported more than 1 time? And so now we have President Biden with his executive orders opening up the floodgates. Well, Mr. President, I tell you this, your decisions have second and third order effects. It's now going to be on local, state law enforcement in Texas to clean up this mess. It challenges law enforcement. It's difficult enough with our staffing issues. And now we're going to have more and more people enter our county and our state across the country. It's ridiculous. And to think about releasing all these unaccompanied minors to these caretakers or these sponsors, it's going to have an effect on our social service programs in the state of Texas. Not only CPS, but our local hospitals. This is dangerous for America. And I encourage everyone to reach out to our Democrat colleagues who seem to support this idea of just opening up the floodgates and letting people come in. Spend a few minutes with me and let me talk to you about my experiences in law enforcement, specifically the last 8 years as sheriff, and I think you may take a different stance. I tell you right now, you look at our fence out here, I bet you it was more difficult for you to get in here to this press conference than it is at our southern border.
The sheriff tells the truth. And now from Texas 24th District, Beth Van Dyne.
This is a manufactured crisis. The Biden administration has manufactured this crisis. Candidate Joe Biden told us exactly what he was going to do. He was going to open up our borders. He was going to let people in. He was going to incentivize folks to come into the city, come into our cities, come into our country illegally. And that's exactly what he has done. He has stripped immigrations and customs enforcement of 90% of their authority to be able to actually deport criminal illegal aliens from our cities. As a former city council member of Irving, Texas, and former mayor of Irving, Texas, we had very strong partnerships with ICE. We had such strong partnerships that at some point, we actually had more criminal illegal aliens deported from our city than any other city per capita in the country. You know what that did? We saw our crime rate plummet. We had the lowest crime rate in our city's history. We became the 5th safest city in the country. And now we're seeing these programs completely stripped. Again, 90% of immigration and customs enforcement authorities have been taken away by the Biden administration. This is terrible for women and children who are being used in sex trafficking. This is terrible for kids in our schools who right now have the ability to have folks who are actually selling drugs and not have our own federal agents being able to deport them from our country. This is terrible for our communities, for our schools, for our country. Americans deserve better.
Thank you, Beth. Former state senator and new member of Congress representing the 4th District of Texas, Pat Fallon.
Thank you, Jody. Who do you want to control our border? The federal government to control it, monitor it, or the most evil people on the planet who are the Mexican drug cartels? Because that's the question that we have. And make no mistake about it, this is a Biden border crisis, and it's putting Texas on the brink. I served in the Texas legislature for 8 years. And the cost to illegal immigration just in the state of Texas is to the tune of about $12 billion a year. That's welfare costs, education, and medical expenses. And it's bleeding our state dry. If these policies continue, we could have 10 to 12 million folks enter this country illegally just this year. Now, why is that important? It's a huge number. Because there's about 5 million people in the world waiting to come to this country legally. 95% of which are people of color. Doing it the right way. Following the rules and the regulations of the country that they want to become a part of. And it is un-American to allow mass unlawful migration where hundreds of thousands or millions of people cut that line in front of those fine folks. They're going to be an immediate benefit to this country. An open border is an immoral border. Those folks on average wait about 12 years to get into this country and become a citizen. We have a member of Congress, Victoria Spartz, who was born in the Ukraine. She spent 6 years to become an American citizen. She did it the right way, and now she's a member of Congress living the American dream. And that's what we all here want for the folks that come to this country illegally. Let me be even clearer. There are 1 million Mexican nationals waiting in their home country to come to this country legally. That's a startling statistic if you consider that's 1% of their entire country wants to get out the right way. Obviously, they have issues. And when you want to talk about morality, half of the women, and in fact, the Huffington Post said 80% in 2014, some very alarmingly high number of women that migrate from southern Mexico and Central America to this country are raped along the journey. An open border is an immoral border. We couldn't make it clearer. And we have to do something about it because lives are at stake. And who are harmed by these predators that come across the border, working either with the cartels or with they're complicit, and it's people of color. So we need to do the right thing, and the people south of the border and north of the border benefit from a secure one. Thank you so much for coming out. I want to thank my colleagues, and God bless Texas.
Well, another veteran and patriot and a fellow West Texan representing Texas' 13th district, part of the food, fuel, and fiber capital of the world, Dr. Ronnie Jackson.
Thank you, Jody. I'll just make one quick observation as the junior physician up here. I just think that the first thing I think of when I look at all this is just another item for the hypocrisy bucket of the far left and the Democrats right now. I mean, you look around right now, all of these medical professionals all over this country that have been jumping up and down, and rightfully so, but jumping up and down talking about the necessity of masking, distancing, vaccinations, testing. Where are these people at right now? All these people are coming across the border right now. Nobody's saying anything about the danger that they pose to us right now from an infectious disease standpoint. I think that Vice President Biden, along with his chief medical advisor, should be the very first one. We've heard him talk numerous times about this subject in particular. This is what was used countless times to shut schools down, to keep us from going back to work. And now that it's an open border, it's perfectly fine. I just encourage President Biden and his medical team to step up to the plate. There are a million reasons why this open border policy is not right, and this is one of them. Thank you.
We have a special guest. We're going to adopt her as an honorary Texan. We should say that we welcome all freedom-loving, law-abiding, God-fearing people from all over who desire a better life for their family to make their home in this great country, this land of immigrants. But we're a land of laws. And if they respect our laws and our sovereignty and the safety of our citizens, we'll welcome them with open arms. But that's not what's happening. But you should hear from a new immigrant and a new member of Congress from the Hoosier State, Victoria Spartz.
Thank you. Well, thank you to Texas delegation and to all of my colleagues. I'll tell you, as a legal immigrant to this country who cherish and values our constitutional freedoms and values and rule of law, which make us the greatest country in the world, that is the only difference between our country and any other country in the world. We have freedoms and we have right and protections and rule of law. I am very appalled what's happening at the border. I want you to spread the message of my fellow colleagues to see what is happening and actually ask President Biden to use some leadership. because what is he doing is un-American. And we have to stand together to fix our borders, because you cannot have open borders and welfare state. It's crumbling our system. So I appreciate having me here. And as a part of our immigration subcommittee, I look forward for us Republicans to deliver good policy to protect our country and have a good legal immigration system. Thank you.
Randy Weber said that was as strong East Texas accent as he's ever heard.
It was.
Well, we stayed longer than we anticipated, and we kept you longer than we anticipated, but we're here because it's serious. It is of the utmost concern, and again, especially for the communities we represent. If you have questions, Kevin Brady would be happy to field those. So we'll open it up for questions if you have them. I think we gave you enough. Yes, ma'am. My response is those are just words, and they're empty, they're hollow. In Texas, it's not about what you say that people hear. It's about what you do. And what he's done with a deluge of reckless executive actions that we've listed have sent a signal, a message loud and clearly to the American people that illegal immigrants are the priority, not the safety and security of his own citizens, number one. And number two, the message is that our border is open for illegal business. And if you ask the drug cartels, they'd say business is as good as it's ever been, sadly enough.
Hey, if I might add, it sounds to me like that Biden's back down in his basement again.
Well, you know, just on that, if I don't mind, if he wants to do something, then adopt the stay in Mexico policy that the Trump administration had. That would help tremendously.
You heard about Title 42 from Chip Roy. Yvette Harrell has introduced legislation. We're all imploring our president to keep that in place. It's a public health restriction. Again, mandates and restrictions on the American people, but a free-for-all policy at the border for folks who have broken our laws. It makes no sense. It really is the last piece of the restrictions that the Trump administration put in place to reduce illegal crossings by 75%. So we are with one voice imploring this president to keep Title 42 in place and start acting responsibly and start fulfilling that first responsibility and most important sacred duty of a president, and that's to protect your people. Any other questions? Anybody wants to?
Yeah, I mean, we were just debating the gun bills on the floor. This is yet again another move by Democrats to ignore the Constitution and to pass legislation that will do nothing to make Americans safer, but target our Second Amendment and our sacred God-given liberties. And most importantly, this bill will do nothing to actually make Americans safe, and it will create a gun registry. It will create ways for the federal government to be able to attack our ability to defend ourselves. What I just said on the floor, we're here talking about border security. Go tell South Texans that it's okay for Democrats to have a wide open border, to then defund police, which is what they're doing, and then tell us we can't have guns and weapons to defend ourselves and our families. I can tell you that doesn't fly in Texas. We're going to defend ourselves. We're going to defend our families because it is a God-given right to do so. These two bills are just yet another addition to the bucket, as one of my colleagues said, of the incompetence of this administration, or more importantly, the very specific attack on our way of life that they're carrying out.
And let me add that being a Texan and a gun owner for a long time, a concealed handgun licensee for a long time, guns aren't the problem. I've never had any one of my guns jump off of a shelf and shoot anybody or kill anybody. Guns don't cause crime any more than computers cause pornography. Let that sink in. To make it harder for law-abiding Americans, citizens, to get guns is absurd. The left needs to go after the real problem and leave law-abiding Americans alone.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all. Appreciate y'all covering it.
Thank you.